Thanks for checking out the BoshNRoll channel. If you want to see me play your deck, hang out with me in the amazing BoshNRoll community in Discord, access to my lists and sideboard guides before tournaments, book an individual coaching session, or just generally want to support what's going on here, check out the Patreon and YouTube membership options. For the finest Magic the Gathering apparel on the market, use code BoshNRoll for 10% off your order at coalesceapparel.shop. Moxfield.com is the easiest way to build a Magic deck online. If you want to play what I'm playing, use my affiliate link to support the channel while you shop for cards at tcgplayer.com and play any deck anytime on Magic Online with a cardhoarder.com loan account. Thanks for being here. Let's go play some Magic. Welcome back to another BoshNRoll video. And today, for the first time ever, on this BoshNRoll video, I will be watching a BoshNRoll video. This is the Sheoldred Doomsday list that I piloted borrowed from Maxtortion, and on the call with me is Maxtortion. Hey, Max.
Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited to do this. This is not a type of content I've ever done before, and basically how we got here is Max watched my video with his deck, and obviously I didn't play it perfectly. It's a difficult deck. There's one spot for sure where I just 100% could have won the game and chose not to, and I'm excited to get to that spot. And then Max watched that video and then reached out and was like, would you like to review that video with me? I was like, yeah, dude. So Max, thanks for making that offer. I'm glad we could make this happen.
Of course, yeah, I really enjoyed watching the video. It was a ton of fun, and I think for your viewers, it was really cool to see what a good, well-rounded player, what your experience was with kind of piloting this deck from some experience, but not too much, like an overall good Magic player piloting Doomsday, because they can kind of see the parts that you had naturally, the parts that you struggled with, and it's a very informative thing for them to kind of see that experience. And so one of the reasons why I offered to hop on was a lot of your comments were basically players who were in that boat and were excited to see that, and were also wondering how that pile should be built or what you can do from the spot. So there's I figured that I would be happy to come on, watch it with you, and the same people who watched your last video, hopefully this is like a follow-up where they can kind of see where I guess some of the very deck-specific knowledge can be transferred over, and if they want to be able to pick up the deck with a little bit more ease, hopefully this can help them out.
Yeah, and I am in that boat myself. This is a deck I respect a lot, but it's always a little intimidating, and I mentioned in the main video here, I've played Doomsday twice in paper. Both times I messaged you earlier in the week asking what you're up to with Doomsday. Both times you're extremely generous with sideboard and pile guides and your time and your expertise. And both times I won a dual land. But I like spiking a local like Saturday thing with 25, 30 people versus showing up at the Legacy Pit or a Star City event or a Grand Prix or the upcoming Buffalo Chicken Dip Open next month for me over here on the East Coast. I am not proficient enough with Doomsday to feel good in those spots, and I would like to be. So this is extremely valuable to me.
Cool. I am happy to provide, in addition to like specific piles, what I really want to do and what I want to convey is like some overall heuristics that you can use and your viewers can use to figure out how to sequence the deck or how to build a pile.
Yeah, that's the most useful thing, because you and I had a little chat through Twitter or Facebook message in the time leading up to this, and one of the things that I caught myself doing was referencing your pile guide. And if your pile guide didn't exactly describe what I was dealing with, my brain just shut off. And I was kind of distracted enough by the pile guide to not be able to reorient to what was actually in front of me, and just made some bullshit pile that did not win the game. And I felt that happening, and I knew it was happening, and this more like live chat heuristics and deducing the pile from available information, that's going to be way more valuable than a spreadsheet. Though also, thank you dearly for your spreadsheet, because that's also great.
Of course, yeah, my spreadsheet's a bit out of date. Part of the putting this all out there for free was I would be able to put out with the time that I could invest into it. And so I invested the time into the sideboard guide for the updated list and really didn't go through and update the pile guide because that would have been an extra, several hours of work. And
Right.
there's win this turn, like same turn win piles, which Doomsday colloquially calls win this turn piles, are pretty straightforward in terms of like what you have in hand with the piles you can make. But then when you pass the turn, I mean, there becomes like, an infinite number of just confounding factors based off of what your opponent has and playing and could draw because they get a draw step and a combat step.
Right.
So there's those are really hard to write piles for, and that's the tricky part.
Yeah, and this is going to be invaluable. And thanks again for doing this. Before we jump into the gameplay, I changed one card in your list based on a podcast episode of Everyday Eternal you were on. You were talking about maybe more Sheoldred, and I jammed one more in and cut the one ley line. What do you think about that decision? Do you think more than 2 Sheoldred is a way to go? Where would you put it if so? And is there anything else you want to say about the list that I didn't say in my first video?
Let's talk about Sheoldred. So she's really good, especially you mentioned this, and I watched your video, and I also listened to your Eternal Glory episode on Jukes, and you guys brought up a great point about Jukes being especially good when they're unknown, and depending upon how robust the Juke is, it can still be good. Not necessarily as devastating, but still good when it's a known quantity. And I think Sheoldred, as you guys I think also landed on, falls into that latter camp of like, yeah, even if they know Sheoldred's coming, what are they going to do? Is Delver going to like leave in Unholy Heat and hope to have Delirium to answer it? Because then they're not bringing in their anti-Doomsday cards, and you're still a Doomsday deck. So like I'm kind of paraphrasing your conclusions on that video or the podcast, but that was absolutely right. And so I like having the Sheoldreds. The only problem I have with 3 is that the power they have is accelerating them out. And when you have essentially 3 Doomsdays and 4 Doomsdays and 3 Sheoldreds in your deck, that's like, 7 expensive spells that all kind of require some amount of rituals. And your rituals themselves end up getting very stretched. As far as the resources go. I've been playing 3 Sheoldreds right now on Magic Online because I really want to see if 3 is right, and it's easier to play with more than trim down than it is to play with fewer and go up. If you notice yourself getting, the reason being is if you notice yourself getting flooded on a card too much, then it's easy to like cut a number of them, but it's hard to say like, this card would be good right now, but I haven't drawn it. How many should I play? That's a more abstract question.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah, when testing a new card, I always recommend play more, and then you can shave down, like try to see it. It's just a good testing lesson.
So what I did to fit her was I cut Mystic Sanctuary. The reason being that Mystic Sanctuary kind of underperformed for me throughout the tournament. The idea behind it was that in grinding matchups, like against in a combo mirror or against control, you're quite regularly hitting 4+ lands. And it sure would be nice to have that land off the top be a Mystical Tutor. And so the idea was that you just, fetch Mystic Sanctuary, put Doomsday on top, and try again. Because it just kind of almost turns if you can turn a fetch land into a banned legacy card, that's a pretty good thing to do, right?
Yeah, so absolutely.
That was the idea. And how it played out in practice is that with Minkskin Boo and to some extent Uro, and just piles of endurance, Control has been able to kind of turn the corner with enough of a clock that tutoring up the Doomsday and casting the Doomsday, then again passing the turn, was like in those late game stages, I wasn't actually able to lose half my life and then take another turn and still be alive. So Mystic Sanctuary ended up not quite playing out as well as I hoped it would. And so I replaced that slot and I kept the Leyline of the Void.
Makes sense. And at the end of this video, I do get dumpstered by Reanimator, where I don't know that I brought in Mystic Sanctuary at all. So makes sense to shore up the bad matchups or have the that definitely makes more sense. Great call. Anything else you want to say before we get into our first game here?
Yeah, if we do end up landing on 2 Sheoldred being the sweet spot, especially with the Juke being a little bit better known, I think that the 15th sideboard card could be either a second Leyline or a first Tormod's Crypt. Um, Tormod's Crypt is kind of a discount relic of Progenitus as far as being able to insulate against endurance goes, because you can the same way you can kind of like sneak through a slow pile with relic, you can just put Tormod's Crypt in play and then gem out an Oracle, and if they endurance you just crypt yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then it's also a graveyard hate piece, a 0 mana graveyard hate piece, which means that if you have a Doomsday pile and you have a cycler on, or access to a cycle or access to a ponder plus a blue source, you can just put Tormod's Crypt on top of your library and draw it and cast it, which allows you to pass the turn with a lot more security.
Oh, that's nasty. I like it.
So that's kind of where I'm at with the deck.
All right. That's great. Is your main deck still intact?
Main deck is exactly as you see here.
All right. Let's move forward into these games. And I kind of envision this being we skip the easy stuff and talk about the challenging spots.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean,
cool.
you, for the most part, played it very well with just some deck-specific kind of snag points. So we can talk about this.
Great. Let's let it rip then. I'm going to hit play here. Yeah, we're here in game 1 where I just had turn 1 Ritual Doomsday with Force Backup on the play.
This is exactly the kind of hand I'd recommend drawing if you want to do well with Doomsday.
Yeah, it seemed pretty strong, and I immediately started consulting your pile guide on what do I do with 1 mana available. What is the Doomsday pile?
So, yeah, let's talk about that in the abstract. Obviously, right now you're on the play here, so you're going to go turn 1, fetch Underground Sea, Dark Ritual, Doomsday. So the reason why you'd fetch, so you had Polluted Delta, you have Misty, so you're kind of stuck. But the reason why you'd even still, if that was a Polluted Delta, fetch Underground Sea, is that Doomsday is essentially a mono blue deck that splashes triple black.
Yep.
Or, I mean, it has discard as well, but if you think about it, after Doomsday, black mana doesn't get you very far.
Right.
So the Underground Sea has the potential to cast Thassa's Oracle, while a Swamp never will. So you Doomsday here, and the way that you can convert your ponders in hand to churn through the pile is to essentially just put basic island on top of your library.
Okay.
So the thing to really think about when you are building this abstract kind of multi-turn win pile, because you've Doomsday on turn 1 and have a forcible backup, is the number of draws that you're going to have. So say you're saying, I'm going to win, it's your turn 1, I'm going to win on turn 3. That's 2 draws from your library. And say that you can draw with one of these ponders and save the other as a force pitch card. So that ponder's a 3rd draw. You'd want your pile to have 2 more cyclers in it, because we've got draw step, ponder, and then if we add 2 cycles, cycle, that's 5 draws for a 5-card library. And so that's like the main heuristic for building a multi-turn pile, is how many times you're going to draw a card.
Okay.
And then the second thing is, how much mana am I going to have in various situations? So putting that basic island in the pile means that that's a land that can't get wastelanded. So you can kind of, for the most part, with like caveats about like Rishodon Port or Trinisphere, just kind of count that as like, I will have at least 1 permanent blue source that's not going to get disrupted. And then Cavern of Souls, you don't necessarily want to expose until you have to. So the pile I would recommend here is Island on top, Edge of Autumn underneath that, and feel free to try to visualize it for everyone at home. I'll go
Yep.
slowly. Cavern of Souls as your third card down. And then another Edge of Autumn as your fourth card down. And then finally Thassa's Oracle on the bottom. So we've discussed how between now and turn 3, that's going to get you 5 draw steps with saving your second Ponder as a force pitch card. And also what it does, having the Oracle on the bottom and the Cavern being the third card down, means that when you draw your Edge of Autumn, you'll be able to, even if your Underground Sea gets wastelanded, use that edge on your Cavern to have 2 lands that you can quote unquote pitch to Edge of Autumn. So you won't be stuck with an edge that you can't cycle.
Okay.
So that's why Cavern is third and Thassa's Oracle is on the bottom.
Okay. It looks like what your pile does that my pile wouldn't do has Cavern in it.
Yes.
The pile I made, I went with 2 fetch lands, 2 underground seas with Oracle in the middle, which is draw the fetch land, and then I can ponder to put the second fetch in my hand, and then on the next turn, duress you, fetch Thassa's Oracle. So I have duress and force backup on Thassa's Oracle, and I don't get to duress if they wasteland me, I guess is the thing that I lose.
Right.
Yeah, how to use the cyclers and how aggressively we should be making piles that include them is a little bit of a mystery to me. Yeah, you went for lands that make mana straight up and Edge of Autumn to get rid of them. I went for lands that remove cards from your deck, just incidentally.
So the pile that you see that you picked is really good against Death and Taxes because it beats draw limiters like Through the Labyrinth, and it beats Rishodon Port because you're leaving fetch lands in play. It beats Wasteland for a similar reason. I'd probably switch out one of these Underground Seas for a basic island because at this point you can kind of even say, hey, if I'm getting wastelanded, then duress is probably not relevant. Like the matchups where you're getting wasted are not the matchups for duress.
Fair enough. Delver would be the big one that cares about both.
Right. Given the fact that you don't have Cavern of Souls in the pile, that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. Putting Cavern on in the pile makes duress irrelevant. It just for free, regardless of matchup. So yeah, getting Cavern in the mix here. And I really like if you stack up Edge of Autumn, you don't care if you get wasted because you can cash it in for a card anyway. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And then the reason to do that is also because, right now you're going to 9. And against Delver, that's, a Delver hit plus 2 bolts.
Right.
And so you really try to, if you're going to take like 4 off a Street Wraith, then it's a Delver hit plus a single bolt. And so you really try not to lose those matchups where you manage to get a turn 1 Doomsday off.
Yep. Makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So is there a turn 1 Doomsday win the game next turn pile? Like that would involve Consider and Deep Analysis, or is that even there at all? But we would lose Force of Will when we LED.
Right, exactly. So LED is the card that accelerates your mana. And exactly what you just said there. There would be a way to, if you put Brainstorm on top, create a pile that wins here without Deep Analysis, and I will go into that in just a second. But the thing that you would really need to still have duress is an extra mana source on top of that. And the way that your hand is constructed doesn't lend itself to that. And given the fact that you have Force of Will, it's probably safer to just kind of hold on to Force of Will instead of exposing yourself to various things that can happen, given that you have no idea what your opponent's on.
Right.
The pile that I'm talking about, by the way, for people at home, is where you put Brainstorm on top of your library. Say you know your mana is safe. Like you know you're going to untap with Underground Sea. You Brainstorm into Lion's Eye Diamond, a cycle effect, Consider, and Thassa's Oracle as your remaining 4 cards below the Brainstorm. Thassa's on the bottom. So you're going to Brainstorm into the Cycler, the Lion's Eye Diamond, and the Consider. You're going to put back an extra card from your hand, it doesn't matter what, below the Consider, which you're putting on top of your library. And then you're going to play out the Lion's Eye Diamond. You're going to activate your cycle effect. You're going to hold priority and crack the Lion's Eye Diamond for triple blue. So your hand is now gone at this point, but you have a cycle on the stack with 3 blue in your mana pool. You're drawing Consider. You're going to cast it. You'll have 2 blue remaining in your mana pool, and the card that you just put from your hand on top of your library on top. Put that in your graveyard, and you draw Thassa's Oracle with nothing left in your library and 2 mana to cast it. Easy peasy.
Right, and only advisable against decks that are not going to cast a counterspell.
Exactly, but it does insulate against life loss and graveyard hate.
Awesome. Okay, a lot. We just spent like 10 minutes talking about a easy turn 1 protected ritual. And
we also put in a lot of what ifs, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate that. We found a cleaner pile, a pile that gets to ignore duress while winning on the same turn. Good stuff.
So let's hit that pile one more time just for the people at home, since we talked about a bunch of piles. That pile is just island on top, basic island. And what that's going to allow you to do is cast Ponder. And then the cards below it are going to be Edge of Autumn, Cavern of Souls, and another Edge of Autumn. You would essentially keep that order where it is and draw an Edge of Autumn off that Ponder. Then the next turn, what will happen is you'll draw Cavern of Souls. You can then cycle your Edge of Autumn, floating mana, and drawing your second Edge of Autumn. Play your Cavern, name Wizard or Merfolk, dealer's choice. Tap it for uncounterable creature mana. Use your second Edge of Autumn, cycle that, and you're drawing your bottom card, Thassa's Oracle, with 2 mana and nothing left in library.
Beautiful.
And you still have Force of Will. So if they have a, Dress Down or Endurance, you have an answer.
And that line, because it doesn't commit to fetch, like if I draw one of these fetch lands with the pile I made, I don't get to duress and ponder, because if I fetch, I could end up drawing these things in the wrong order and not clear my deck. Your pile with basic island on top lets us duress and ponder. It's actually cleaner because it has cavern and it lets us fire off the duress without ruining the pile. Good stuff.
Yep, so that's what I'd recommend there.
All right, let's go on to the next game, or let's go into sideboarding.
I like how quickly you pin this as the Epic Storm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the game doesn't end. We do get one turn of information where my opponent went Mishra's Bauble, Bloodstained Mire, which immediately tells me it's the Epic Storm because Mishra's Bauble decks don't play Bloodstained Mire. So I know I'm in a combo mirror, and this Force of Will is going to come up, and I know they're not going to force me back. And this also helps with sideboarding.
And that's specifically because Blue-Red Delver doesn't play Bloodstained because they play Basic Island.
Right. It is cool that Doomsday, like the air quotes turn 1, even though it's not really turn 1, like we're going to win on turn 3. But we get sideboard information where most combo decks that win on turn 1 don't get.
Right. Sometimes. A fair amount of the time, an opponent who doesn't think they have a chance of beating you will then just concede to hide that information. But you're right that if a deck literally just wins on turn 1, there's no chance that your opponent, they don't even have an option to reveal things if they want to.
Right. Yeah, so I'm just following your guide straight up here. This is pretty clearly just load up all of the interaction spells, all the anti-tutor spells. We're on the Sheoldred juke as well. Is there anything you want to add to this? Or I think among the general viewers who would be consuming this sort of high-level content, they can understand why Force, Duress, and Opposition Agent are good against Epic Storm.
Yeah, so kind of in the more advanced like macro strategy approaches, against the Epic Storm, you're a good draw step away from dying a lot of the time. And so you don't really want to take away the things that can allow you to win in the same turn. But on the same side, or I guess flip side of the coin, they don't have too much in the way of disrupting you. So you don't actually have to worry too much about casting a Thassa's Oracle with 2 cards left in library and then having a Pyroblast for it. So you can create these little bit more exposed piles. Imagine just you have a handful of cards and you can cycle into a brainstorm. So you cycle into a brainstorm, and your bottom 3 cards of your pile are just Lotus Petal, Thassa's Oracle. Like, that's just that kind of pile where you're just, playing out 2 petals in your Oracle, completely exposed with 2 cards in library, would be incredibly risky against most decks, but against the Epic Storm, you have the bandwidth to build piles like that, so you can cut things like the Consider if you wanted to, but also I think keeping it is fine. I like keeping like the Deep Analysis and Consider for the most part because they're blue cards and you're playing 8 forces. But say you pitch them to a force, you're still able to win the game.
That makes sense. Yeah, and cutting the Edge of Autumn because you don't need to completely empty your deck. I like that. Street Wraith, your life total is not really under attack until you're dead. It's like tendrils you or you win at 1, and it doesn't matter. There's not much space in between. I guess softening yourself up and then passing the turn cuts how many storm they need in half, which is a concern. But if they're not getting anything going, then Street Wraith is cleaner than Edge of Autumn.
Yeah, the big thing that I am afraid of against the Epic Storm is getting echoed post Doomsday.
Right.
If I'm very low on resources and my hand plus the Doomsday and Graveyard plus my 5 cards in library are less than 7, then they can just cast an Echo Vions
and you just
win.
die.
Yep. So that's, or if you exactly 7, they echo you, you have nothing in library, you draw for turn, you also die. So
right.
Yeah, I'm afraid of that. Against Ad Nauseam Tendrils is where I've noticed more frequently that I'll like soften myself up, quote unquote, and then just get natural tendrils.
Okay. And another thing I want to point out is if you have Sheoldred in play, but a total of less than 7 objects in your graveyard, hand, and library, and they go for Echo, you're dead before they take 14. The game ends when you try to draw from an empty library before the 7 lose 2 life triggers even go on the stack. So Sheoldred will not save you. She will save you if you have exactly 7 objects and they're at 14 or less life. But
right. What Sheoldred does very effectively against the Epic Storm is give you something to ritual out, and then kind of you play a Delver game, if you will, where you've got the Sheoldred in play, clocking them for minimum 6 a turn. If they have the audacity to cycle a Mishra's Bauble, then more than that. Meanwhile, you're dressing them, thought seizing them, and forcing them. And the hope is just that you can. You're playing a tempo game at that point. So that's where Sheoldred comes into play.
Right. And I can talk about spoilers because this video is a week old and we're just reviewing it. And that is exactly what happens here. I'm much more interested in talking to you about Doomsday games. Like, I just have Force Backup, Oppo Agent. I can shoot it out any point here. And if I remember correctly, I think Sheoldred joins the party a couple turns from now.
I think Oppo goes functionally coast to coast.
Okay.
If I recall correctly, you ritual out a Street Wraith.
Oh yeah.
And your opponent at that point has a dual land with the swamp type in play, swampland type. And so you could even beat an Empty the Warrens because Street Wraith has Swamp Walk.
Sure does. Yeah, I did remember winning this game with 2 creatures in play. Street Wraith is a pretty good one. And the natural Force of Negation from hand for their natural Echo, which would have ended up in the graveyard otherwise. Yeah, this game was pretty sweet. And I'm on this clock where I have 2 rituals that aren't really doing anything. A Street Wraith that's not helping me get anywhere, but I can cut a turn off the clock with Force Backup by jamming it into play. And that is what happened. And okay. This video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, the easiest way to build Magic decks online. Moxfield supports over 30 formats, including Legacy and every other format you'll see on this channel. They have multiple customizations so you can view your deck how you want. Text view, stacks, grid, custom grouping by type, subtype, color, light mode, dark mode. However you want to see your deck, they can provide it for you. My favorite feature is you can choose your set printing make the deck look exactly how you want it to. The deck screen features expandable sections that show you what tokens your deck makes, your recent change history to the deck, stats about mana curve and opening hand distribution, mana cost distribution. You can deal out sample hands and even play test the deck. Island Ponder. You know I'm keeping this one. This site has everything. Follow me on moxfield.com to keep up with decks I'm playing for the channel and what I'm up to in paper. I'll see you there. We are in the next game now. I'm on the play here with another turn 1 Doomsday. No force backup, no backup of any kind. What do you think about this hand, and what would you do with it?
Snap Keep, Snap Doomsday.
Okay.
Essentially, in this kind of situation, the ways that it can backfire are that they are on a Force of Will deck and they force you.
Right.
In which case, you've traded 2 cards for their 2 cards, but they've had to be a Force of Will deck and have to have Force of Will, which is not always a given.
Right.
Secondly, in your hand itself, you had Personal Tutor. So if they counter your Doomsday, you essentially have a backup Doomsday. And given the fact that your hand has both Deep Analysis and Cavernous Souls, your hand is pretty robust. Say you put a Lion's Eye Diamond on top of your library, you can draw that Lion's Eye Diamond, play the Cavernous Souls, flashback LED, I misspoke. Crack the LED for triple blue, flashback Deep Analysis, and you're essentially going to be able to cycle into your Oracle and cast it uncounterably.
With exactly 2 cards left in the deck?
Or just put those as 2 cycles, so you have
sure.
0 cards left. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, I don't think it occurred to me at any point to just use LED to power out Deep Analysis from hand.
Yeah, it's a nice thing to have access to. And then also, in a similar but not exact way, having a Ponder in hand or something, if you put Lion's Eye Diamond on top of your library, you can Ponder and then crack LED for triple blue, and then do some combination of just cycling into Oracle or what have you with that triple blue mana and play around days.
Gotcha.
So it gives you another out, if you will. It's also a frequently played strategy against mono red Stompy, because if you can just quickly, after you've played Doomsday, cycle into an LED, and even if you can't win that turn, just cast the LED, then you can beat Blood Moon and you can beat Trinisphere. Because then you can just draw a cycler, Oracle. And you've only cast 1 spell on that second turn, and you didn't have to use any mana to cast it, because LED cracks for any color, even under a Blood Moon, and 3 mana for Melody, 3 mana for Trinisphere. So you've kind of got your bases covered. I want to bring that up here since it's the kind of thing you'd be considering when making this pile turn 1 in the dark. And I don't think you played against Mono Red Stompy in this league.
I did not play against Mono Red Stompy. Can understand the concern about Blood Moon and Trinisphere showing up after you Doomsday. I'm going to try to get my pile back where it's more visible. There it is. Yeah, I remember being tripped up in this spot because Cavern was in my hand, and it doesn't help you develop anything. It literally only casts Oracle in your deck. There's not a lot of colorless pips that Cavern can help you move forward on, and LED just as a tool to get Deep Analysis going, not on my radar at all, and it would have made this pile much better. So
another nice pile here that allows you to insulate using a Force of Will, you have extra blue cards in your hand. So that would make me think about, okay, is there a way that I can start to accelerate through my library and give myself a Force of Will backup? So say again, you put Basic Island on top of your library. You draw Basic Island. Say you have some 2 Cyclers and a Force of Will as your top 3 cards. You could put the Force of Will into your hand, and then next turn, untap and just turn out Cyclers until you get to your bottom card of Thassa's Oracle. Play your Cavern from hand so that Oracle's uncounterable, and just jam out an Oracle, and you'd still have access to Force of Will over that kind of dead space turn of turn 2, where you don't know what could be happening.
Right, and because basic islands in play and caverns in my hand, I don't lose to wasteland there.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay. Yep, makes a lot of sense. This is on turn 1. I don't remember what this matchup is. This is actual Delver, right?
Yep.
And I did ponder. I remember specifically saying, like, if they ponder here, or if they daze me here, I don't mind, because then daze is out of their hand and they're back a land.
Yep.
And that
I
is what
really
ended
like
up
that.
happening.
Yeah, I really like that approach that you had. Of they can either, because they didn't have a clock in play, they can either disrupt you or kill you, but they can't do both.
Right. And the cavern means I don't really care about anything else, and just fetch the sea, draw the oracle, and we're in there with the
Right.
turn 3 win.
Yep. So one of those places where Island's just a little safer, but Underground Sea is, such a sweet magic card.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah, I did it this round and last round where I played my around wasteland by putting a fetch land in the pile rather than just the basic island heads up, where both of these piles you ended up recommending just put island on top rather than get clever with a fetch land dual land.
A fair number of Doomsday lists play 0 basics. So if you're a Doomsday player and you play 0 basics, then that is exactly the kind of situation that you expose yourself to, but you also insulate yourself in situations where, you don't have a ritual effect, but you need to cast Doomsday, and Island does not cast Doomsday. So there's a reasonable argument both ways here. I see that you're following the sideboard guide, trying to fit a third Sheoldred, and I am also not exactly sure what to cut. The reason why we have 3 cyclers in the deck post board, why we're cutting 2 street wraiths, is because there's an air quotes uncounterable. Say you manage to squeeze out a turn 1 Doomsday against Delver. The plan is to never cast an uncounterable spell again. Or sorry, never cast a counterable spell again. Make your last remaining spell not one they can counter.
Right.
Because Delver plays 6 Pyroblasts in the 75 at this point, and Doomsday itself was not Pyroblastable, so it's very likely they have Pyroblast, which means that your blue cantrips are exposed to it, and Oracle and anything short of an empty library is not exposed to it. The reason that we're cutting one Thassa's Oracle is because Delver is not a deck that affords you the time to cast a backup Oracle.
Right.
So we've essentially conceded that we're not going to have time to do a double Oracle pile, and we're just going to try to get a fast Doomsday on the stack and then not cast any more counterable spells.
Okay. And I believe we were talking about this 6 months ago, last time we talked about Doomsday together, the personal tutors where just sort of jam Doomsday down the Delver player's throat because you can't win a long game. I think at the time we were kind of joking, oh no, do we need to buy a third personal tutor? And now you have 4. And they're all still in the deck against the 6 Pyroblast deck.
It hurts so much. I literally earlier today just spent $70 on my 4th personal tutor.
I believe when we had this conversation 6 months ago and we were joking about buying the third, I was just like, I'll take the ice bath and just buy 2. I think I have 4. I didn't check my binder since this 4 copy list came out, but I'm pretty sure I went all the way in when I was
nice.
When it seemed likely we wanted more.
I just figured with the tournament winnings from the Showcase Challenge, I could afford to be a little bit frivolous and just convert some of that into paper Doomsday cards.
Yeah, like 250 tickets or whatever translates to like $180, and yeah, you're still up on the weekend.
It was actually it was nice. Showcase Challenge win gives you 200 treasure chests,
Oh wow, okay.
a foil set, and 900 play points.
Oh, easy
So
money
between
then.
the 500 tickets and the foil set, we're sitting at like 650 easy. So I mean, you can justify buying a $70 uncommon that's not on the reserve list.
Yeah.
And could easily be reprinted at any point because it just says personal tutor on it. And there's nothing about that that's location specific or flavor specific. And the second they do, that's a $2 card.
Yeah. I mean, they've done some of that in other spots, like look at Imperial Seal. Like Portal is still dope because it's Portal and has its own like aesthetic and rarity to it. But you're right that you can get a personal tutor for $2 as soon as they reprint it. I
Yes,
also saw that you got the Phyrexian Arch Sheoldreds. Excellent choice. Very cool.
Thank you. They're the same price as the regular ones, so I figured why not.
Yeah, I punted real bad. I went on TCG Player and I saw that the Phyrexian Art one was like $48, and I was like, I'm not paying that for a standard legal rare. And then I, without thinking, I think in cascading order, it was that's a crazy amount to pay for a standard legal card. And then, oh, they all cost that much. And then, oh, I'll put this one in my cart, and ended up with the normal English language, real Earth language ones when the Phyrexian ones are the same price. So I blew it a little bit.
Unless all your cards are in Phyrexian. No,
yeah. What do you think about this hand? I mulliganed like a Ponder and no real action hand into this basic land Lotus Petal 3rd mana source Force blue card Sheoldred hand.
I like it. It has a plan.
All right. That's what I like too. Like it has a plan and it's the other plan.
Yep. The plan is cast a Sheoldred ahead of schedule. And at the very minimum, Lotus Petal is going to help with that. I agree with not casting Ponder here. Because
yeah, I mean,
if you ponder, what are you looking for? You're looking for a blue card. You've already got one.
Also, my opponent shocked in Steam Vents and didn't cast a spell. That's Pyroblast all day, every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is. I am going to Pyroblast you.
Yeah.
And anything and everything. So this spot here, you mentioned this in the video, is why I like Basic Swamp. Because now you have Island Swamp in play. And as any Ad Nauseam Tendrils player can tell you, this is kind of the sweet spot to be against Delver. Because you can discard them. Hey, there's the Pyroblast.
Yeah, surprise.
And not expose yourself to Wasteland.
And they have the Wasteland too. They had Pyroblast that I played around by not pondering. And then I have Wasteland that you built around by putting these 2 basics in the deck. And
I like pondering here. That makes sense. I also like Brainstorm and Petal as your cards because Brainstorm is your pitch card to force, and Extra Petal is your way to play around days.
Yep, we just covered all the bases on that one. Like, there's not a card they could draw, right? Or they could force and use the Pyroblast. If they drew exactly force, they can beat my Sheoldred here.
Yeah, so I think you say in the video, oops, I misstacked, because you intended to put the Petal as your second card, just so you could play around days, but you're like, I hope they don't have it. And do they have it? I don't think they do.
Nope, free money. And as I recall, Sheoldred just wins this game. We don't need to spend too much time on this. Let's find...
There are some theoretical questions about whether Sheoldred beats Murktide Regent, and I think you kind of demonstrated that yes, it does.
Right, yeah. They do have a medium-sized Murktide in play, and just even if they don't play the game by declining to cantrip, I can still cantrip. I'll draw those cards. I'm good. And Sheoldred, in addition to all the other words, just has Death Touch. So if I'm ever in a spot where offering a trade with Murktide makes sense, you can do that.
Right, but also like, they can't attack you there. You're at 26.
Yeah, like they can never attack. You come here to level up at Magic. To level up as a software engineer, check out the new YouTube series Dev Better, hosted by the founder of 7-Factor Software and Magic player, Jeremy Duvall. 7-Factor's small teams of high-performing engineers build custom mobile apps, APIs, and highly scalable systems for Fortune 500 companies and ambitious startups with great ideas. If you'd like to hire 7-Factor, or maybe join their team, contact them through their website at 7factor.io. And don't forget to subscribe to 7-Factor's YouTube for every episode of Dev Better. Okay, now we're in round 3. I am still on the play, and
so
this one, there is an aggressive line to turn 1 Doomsday here. What do you think?
There is an aggressive line to turn 1 Doomsday here. I don't think you need it because you have the Dark Ritual.
Okay.
I think that if the aggressive way to turbo out the Doomsday, by which I mean for anyone watching this, is you personal tutor the Doomsday to the top of your library, and then you crack your Street Wraith, and in response, crack the LED for triple black and discard your entire hand. And you've drawn you draw the Doomsday, you cast the Doomsday with the triple black that LED has afforded you. Now, this hand gives you a couple extra justifications to doing that, which are that you can also play out the Lotus Petal, which is nice. And you can also, once you Personal Tutor Doomsday to the top, you could crack Street Wraith, crack Edge of Autumn, and like holding priority this whole time, and then crack LED. So you essentially get an extra card as you're doing all of this in your hand in addition to the Doomsday. So you're not completely out of gas, but you're pretty much out of gas. It's an all-in play.
Right. It's totally all in. And there is the float mana in response to the cycle, float black with LED, or there's Lotus Petal Dark Ritual, leave LED in play post Doomsday. Like there's a line that leaves Petal in play and a line that leaves LED in play.
Yep. And so
both of which are comparably all in, but they affect the pile.
Something else that motivates towards not going all in here is a Cycler plus LED in hand means that after you go Dark Root Doomsday on turn 2, you can win on the spot. So right now you'd be going all in to put a turn 1 Doomsday on the stack and then winning turn 2. Meanwhile, the more conservative line, if you will, still wins turn 2. So you're winning at the same point, but you'll just have more information.
Right.
So yeah. Agree with that Personal Tutor, agree with that Doomsday.
And now I think, if I recall correctly, I jam here.
I think what you do is you play out Petal, you cycle into that. Actually, I like that. I kind of like this line. So yeah, they force you here. That's rough. I like that. So you could have won on the spot here. Just pause it real quick.
Sure.
So say that Doomsday resolved. You could play out Lion's Eye Diamond. And with ideas or with some amount, there's a few ways to play it. I'm going to say a really basic line first, just to kind of bring it up. You could play out Lion's Eye Diamond, use your Edge of Autumn to cycle post Doomsday. You've cracked your LED for triple blue, and you just draw a series of cyclers into Thassa's Oracle.
Okay.
Just win on the spot. You could also, with this, given the fact that you have deep analysis, Edge of Autumn, you can put LED in play, it's up to you, but you don't crack LED in response. You draw the deep analysis, and then you crack LED, discard your deep analysis, and then you draw 2. And essentially what you're doing there is drawing Lotus Petal and Thassa's Oracle, or if you pass a turn, you can put Cavern and Thassa's Oracle into your pile.
Okay, yeah, my Doomsday didn't resolve, obviously, so I didn't take the time to think about it. I'm not sure I would have realized that I had so many routes to win the game on the spot without passing if it had resolved. Also, now that we've talked through it, the cycle float off LED, Doomsday off LED, leaves us with Ritual, and this is a blue deck that's splashing triple black, where the Lotus Petal Ritual line, leaving LED uncracked, gives us triple blue.
Exactly.
So it's much better to do the Lotus Petal version if you're going to go for the turn 1 Doomsday, which...
Right. And, yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And I like everything you did here.
Cool.
It got answered, but that's life sometimes.
Yeah, I punted by my opponent having Force of Will.
So right here, you have Personal Tutor, which is actually pretty great.
Right.
Because what you can do at this spot is not this turn, but next turn. You can Personal Tutor to put Doomsday on top of your deck. You can play out the Lion's Eye Diamond, and you can cycle your Street Wraith that you're also going to be drawing to draw into it.
I definitely
cracking LED in response.
I think this is a spot where I did not see the line. I remember I have Personal Tutor, but I can't get this Cabal Ritual on the stack, and ... don't have 3, but in fact I do.
So the reason to take these risky lines on a macro scale right now is you are way down on resources.
Yeah.
And your opponent has pitched an Omniscience, which means that you don't know when you're dead.
Right.
Like with a fair deck, you know, okay, here's how much damage they can present to me, here's how many turns I have to win the game. But when they force pitch Omniscience, that means you're a show and tell away from losing the game at any point. And so taking riskier lines makes more sense.
Yeah, I think if I had seen the cycle into Doomsday crack LED line, I would have taken it. That all makes sense on that macro level.
Yeah, post board against this kind of deck, you have, like 8 forces and a bunch of pitch cards, even access to Sheoldred, so you don't need to play as risky. But just the way that the turn 1 played out is kind of dictating the rest of the game. This isn't like always approach Sneak and Show this way. This is
Right.
approach this particular game this way.
And that was like the hymn to Turok that you talked about on match 1, game 1, turn 1. Where it's like even if they force, they're down 2 for 2. And
Right.
Lotus Petal was involved, and so was Personal Tutor, so it's like 4 for 2. But still, they're down the Force of Will and a card, and just jamming another Doomsday in quickly would have been the way to go.
Yeah, and that's so one of the reasons why we play Personal Tutor, and it's a terrible card, but we play it, is because Ponder and Brainstorm are great, much better cards in the abstract, but are not as good at finding Doomsday. I like this Edge of Autumn, by the way. This was
Okay.
not a line I saw.
I was going to pause this to ask you about using Edge of Autumn as a shuffle.
Yeah,
and
your top 2 cards are dead.
Yeah, there's plenty of mana here. We have to lose Lotus Petal because my lands don't make green, obviously. But yeah, it just looks at more cards.
And I agree with finding the island because it means that you can cantrip into cantrip into Doomsday with your triple black.
Yeah, I did
So, yeah.
listen to your the podcast where you basically said Swamp is not a good card, and you mostly don't want it. But there's like the Sheoldred plan incentivizes you having it.
Yep. And yeah, the amazing creatures on the show and tell side of the board where they cheat Brazen Borrower and Simian Spirit Guide into play.
Yeah. It turns out it doesn't even matter.
Yeah. Giving you a taste of kind of what you did to your opponent on match 1.
Right. Yeah. And at this point, they attack me down to 7. If I resolve a Doomsday, I'm at less than 5. So I actually can't win this game. I guess
Right,
I'd have to brainstorm into Doomsday and another cantrip, and it would all have to resolve, and I'd have to do a no pass the turn pile.
Yep. Which is a big ask.
Yep, big ask indeed.
Fortunately, Grizzlebrand entered and just put you out of your misery.
Yeah, didn't have to figure it out. Love to see it.
Whoops, I forgot to put Sneak and Show in.
Yep.
You figured it out.
Yeah, and from your tweet, I like that your tweet specifically said, if a matchup isn't on the list, don't ask me. Figure it out. And I like that mentality. Generally, I think that sideboard guides, I don't want to say hurt more than they help, but they convey the wrong message. I love using sideboard guides by reverse engineering how an expert pilot thinks about the matchup rather than as gospel. But the folks out there who just think like, no, this is right because Maxtortion does it, are thinking about it wrong.
Yeah, I like sideboard guides. I write sideboard guides for myself because my working memory is really poor.
Mm-hmm.
Just by nature of how my brain works, I have trouble remembering things all the time. And so I use sideboard guides so I don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
Yes.
And so that's where I like sideboard guides is I won't necessarily overlook something. I will not strictly adhere to it. If I see something that I've written down, I'm like, this seems wrong, then I'll change it. I'll make that decision. I'm not going to be a stickler for that. By the way, I definitely agree with fighting over the Sheoldred.
Okay, cool.
The big motivation here is that you have Brazen Borrower, which can supplement in a multitude of ways.
Right. Clear the snake attack or just bash.
Exactly. So, yep, everything that you've done so far in the game makes sense, including finding a force of Brainstorm into Doomsday. That's nice.
Yeah.
Granted, you can't quite
good
cast
ponder.
a Doomsday, but yeah, great ponder.
Yeah, that's why I put it at the bottom.
Yep. And then I also agree on waiting a turn here because you're trying to maximize your chance of hitting with the Brainstorm.
Yeah, and that's something that my channel listeners should recognize. Just if you're not under pressure, see as many cards as you can.
Yep.
It's not a race, unless it's a race.
Yeah, with Doomsday specifically, one of the things that runs counter to that is oftentimes against blue decks, what you want to do is try to win before they can convert the cantrips in their hand into cards with text on them.
Makes sense.
So kind of like why YOLOing that turn 1 Doomsday is worthwhile. Oop, great Thoughtseize, take the Crystal Brand and not the redundant accelerant effect. Fantastic. But yeah, the reason why you do that is because if you just turn 1 the Doomsday, then never cast another counterable spell just by, Cycles, Cavern, and Oracle, their cantrips are not, even finding a Forcible isn't going to matter.
Right. And here is where this league just really went on its ear for me. We can skip your pile guide here, and this is the pile I made, which it is a pass the turn twice pile that I thought was a pass the turn once pile when I took it. I was trying to get duress through the cannon. I was trying to fade 1 turn of sneak attack, get duress through the cannon, and then Oracle. And I messed this up. Talk us through this. Let me back up to where the whole deck is visible. But this is the pile I made.
This is a really hard pile to make because you are really close to winning in so many different ways. And you felt the pain as you were kind of going crazy trying to figure this out. Yeah, it's a great point to pause. And here's the problem. So if you brainstorm into so you draw a duress effect and use it, and you brainstorm, you have no extra card in hand to convert into Lion's Eye Diamond and a cycle effect.
Right.
Having the extra card in hand and the Lion's Eye Diamond in your deck, clicking here, is how to do that. So the reason that you're so close but not quite there is that you don't have that extra card in hand in theory. And then if say you had the Consider Deep Analysis here, the other thing is drawing a card off the top plus brainstorming into the Consider means that by the time you cast Deep Analysis, you've drawn past your deck.
Right.
You can't choose to stack a 6-card library, unfortunately. So
yeah, bummer.
Yeah, so you're really close on that axis too. The third thing to realize here is if Brainstorm is going to resolve, then you've already insulated against Pyroblast in a way. Anything that they could dress against, Brainstorm resolving has functionally the same effect of getting a Pyroblast out of their hand. Or they can let Brainstorm resolve. But either way, that can help you get towards Cavern Oracle. So all of that said, here's the pile that I would recommend. Street Wraith, Thassa's Oracle, Cavern of Souls.
Okay, now, there is not a Street Wraith in my deck. I boarded 2 of them out.
Edge. Yeah, Street Wraith Edge is going to be okay as well.
Okay.
So and I think you also are down to 1 Oracle.
Yeah, I'm down to 1 Oracle and 1 of each Cycler.
So oftentimes, and I think my sideboard guide made this mistake against ad nauseam titles, I've since corrected it. I like to have 2 Oracles when I'm bringing in the 8 forces.
Right.
So that I can pitch 1 to force and still have an Oracle.
The heir and the spare.
Exactly. I like to have the spare when I need to pitch the heir. So what the pile, say we had access to our entire 75 while building this, because I think that's a more valuable thing to talk about.
Sure.
The idea with this is 2 cycles, let's say Street Wraith Edge Bottom. What you would do is you would draw 1 of your 2 cyclers, cycle that one, so you've got 3 cards left in library, and then cast Brainstorm. Because at that point, you've got 3 cards in library. You can't cast Brainstorm later than that, or you just lose. And your opponent has drawn 1 mystery card. If they answer the Brainstorm, say they Pyroblast or Flusterstorm the Brainstorm or whatever, you just shrug it off, you flip your second cycle effect, and you draw into your Oracle, which is your third card down, and you cast it.
Right.
So you cycle once, you cast Brainstorm, they Pyroblast it, you go, okay, cycle, and then cast Oracle. You've got 2 cards in the library, you win. Say that they let Brainstorm resolve. You've then you draw Oracle Cavern, and you put back, because 2 cards, so you can put back a cycle and the second Oracle, and then you just go Cavern Oracle. And say that they Pyroblast that, because even with Cavern Oracle, they can still Pyroblast it with Devotion and non-empty library. You lose that Oracle. You just attempt it again next turn by using your last cycle, drawing the last Oracle, and casting it.
Right. Yeah, so the second Oracle ends up functioning as duress in this pile in a way, because the difference is if they don't have it, I win, where duress is guaranteed to cost me a spell and a mana and a card in my deck, where the Oracle, I like the logic that they're going to Pyroblast Brainstorm if they have it, and that functions as duress, so setting a cycler up under that where you can just win anyway makes a lot of sense. But also the Boss's Oracle functioning as duress on specifically Pyroblast, where they lose if they have nothing, versus I get to see a hand with nothing in it if duress resolves.
And then the last little thing, say you had to pitch your Oracle or you sided it out, like you have access to 1 Oracle in this situation. You can put an Emergency Doomsday on the bottom of your library, provided that you don't use an Edge of Autumn. And you have triple black in play. You have 3 Underground Seas.
Right.
Say they Pyroblast your Oracle. Your last card is just Doomsday, and you try again.
Okay. How often does that come up?
Once every 100 games.
Okay. I've probably played about 50, 60 games with Doomsday, and I haven't seen it yet. So
no,
your math checks out.
No, actually, it doesn't check out. I've played way more than, played probably 1,000 games of Doomsday, and it's come up like 3 times. So
okay. Even better. All right.
Once like 300 games.
Yeah, that's cool. If that's the plan, is Emergency Doomsday better than like the duress pile, where you just duress and Cavern all on the same turn and you win through whatever?
I think that against an active sneak attack specifically, a riskier way to get Oracle in play fast and then trying to recover if that gets answered is probably better.
Okay.
Than the other way around. There's also an option of if you can draw both Oracle and Chain of Vapor in the same turn, and it's a non-empty library and you have Cavern, they Pyroblast your Oracle once it's in play, you can Chain of Vapor it back to your hand.
Okay, that's cool.
Like there's a few, like, I'm just kind of bringing up all these things because no one who's watching this video is going to be in your exact game state. They're going to be in similar ones.
Yeah, and you leveraging your 1,000 games of experience here to teach us all these tricks is exactly what you're here for. And yeah, that's super cool. And it's even possible to bound, like if you have resources laying around, which we kind of do here, chain my Oracle in response to Pyroblast, sack a land, send their sneak attack back, make them rebuild. In addition to whatever, like if I can't go again all at once. And their sneak attack came in off Lotus Petal. They don't even have red anymore. So that could be huge.
I still mess up my piles, for just full disclosure. I lose winnable games a fair amount. I went 0-2 drop at my last paper weekly. And I lost round 1 to Oops All Spells. It was a pretty swingy matchup, as the decks tend to be, and I just ended up on the wrong side of things. And then against Death and Taxes round 2, I lost a winnable game because I built my pile slightly wrong. There's a spot where I put a fetch land in, and if I had put a cycle effect that I intended to cycle on my opponent's turn to play Run-Spirited Labyrinth, I would have been able to insulate against an opposition agent, which my opponent actually had.
Whoa.
And could have won the game, but instead I made that little mistake and lost. So
Is that
I
is
yeah.
is that reasonable? Like, did they indicate to you in any way they could have opposition agent in their death and taxes deck, or is it just like
Yeah.
build against what? Because like when playing any combo deck, I'm like, sculpt your position for what they could reasonably have. Like, do you know that they play Oppo Agent? Did they show you black mana, or did they just get you?
On board Scrubland.
Okay, all right,
And I know my opponent. He's a great Death and Taxes player and a very nice human being.
okay,
And I know that he plays opposition agent. So I had insider info,
okay, all right,
and even still I didn't play around it. So I messed up.
all right. Fair enough. Yeah, I want to make that differentiation for the listeners as well. Like, if they just had Vile on 3 showing mono white mana and Viled in Oppo Agent, like, freaking congrats, whatever. I'm not going to play around that. But even something like a Scrubland, which is not normally seen in Death and Taxes, should have your heckles raised. Like, what is that for? What is it doing? So that is a great catch on yourself there.
Right. And what I was trying to do is play around Mindbreak Trap and Spirited Labyrinth. And I got so zoned in on those that I didn't consider that I could also play around Opposition Agent. And as Doomsday, a lot of the time you can't play around everything. And this is where kind of a Death and Taxes level format knowledge comes into play. Because when you're playing Death and Taxes, or even like Blood Moon Stompy, the idea is, okay, what does my opponent's deck want to do? And how can I make that the hardest for them to achieve?
Right.
Now, Doomsday is kind of the flip side of that, is what can my opponent's deck do to me? And how do I play around as much of it as possible? Because sometimes you can't play around everything, especially when your opponent combines pressure, draw limiters, and mana denial. So you kind of have to choose.
Right. And then when they splash their perfectly good monocolor deck into a hate card specifically for you, it becomes even worse. And hateful out there, tough in these streets. Okay, this was the moment in the league that I wanted to dissect the most, and I think we identified both that I boarded incorrectly. Like, I have the wrong 60 out of my possible 75 in the mix here to even have a shot at making a good pile. I think the duress was a little greedy, and that could have just been a card that shoves through my deck faster. And using Oracle number 2 to function as duress, but they lose if it resolves rather than just discard a card, it is a really cool angle that was not on my radar. Good
And
stuff.
this is one of those situations again that goes back to that heuristic of counting draws. So if you want to just think about things in an abstract way, you're going to draw once on your next turn, and then to cast an Oracle with 2 cards in library, you have to have 2 more things that say draw a card.
Right.
So 2 cycles and an Oracle will do that. A single cycle and a Brainstorm will do that, but you can't Brainstorm if you have fewer than 3 cards in library. So those are the general heuristics that led to the pile. It's not like I have a secret spreadsheet where this pile exists.
Gotcha.
That's how to kind of reason that. It's counting draws and counting mana. Like, you have blue, blue, blue access to it in play. Brainstorm is blue, Oracle is blue, blue. That lines up. And then we just counted the draw steps. That also lines up.
Right. Yep. Makes perfect sense. I also just noticed that a few minutes ago I said my opponent doesn't have red mana. They do. This is a volcanic island. It's just all of the red aspects of it are covered up by my box here. So I just had a brief moment of horror of I was playing around Pyroblast when they don't even have red, but they do. It's right here. So,
if you leave the box up there, then they can't use it for red.
That is what I've heard. Yep. That sounds like a 2008 PTQ tactic. Just hiding information behind your deck box or something. What do you mean? Man. Yeah, it was right here. All right. Cheating aside, this pile does still win the game in highly protected circumstances, but it's a double pass pile against an active sneak attack with me at 15. So given the matchup, this was not great. Should have taken some risks.
Say you built this pile, like you committed to it, you hit done, and then realized your mistake, in air quotes.
Yeah.
What you could do in that situation is just put Duress as your last card.
Yeah.
And have or Cavern of Souls as your 4th card down. And your top 3 are your 2 Cyclers and Oracle as your middle card. That would be the way to recover with the pile as built. Because that gives you the best chance of winning, where you kind of do the same thing of you cycle once, and then you brainstorm and you see what happens. If they don't answer your brainstorm, you have Cavern Oracle with 1 card left in library. And if you're really suspicious about what they do, or say they play Dress Down in their Seek and Show deck, then you can end up having at the very end, the turn after, Duress and then Cavern Oracle.
Yeah, the giant piece here is the one that if they drew Pyroblast, they'd hit my Brainstorm. And I can just cast Brainstorm, it gets Pyroblasted, cycle, Oracle with 2 cards in my deck. Or would it be down to 1 there? Draw for turn and then cycle. There'd be 2 cards left.
And more generally against Seek and Show, something that comes up a fair amount, so I think it's worth bringing up for people watching the video. If your opponent doesn't have a sneak attack in play, they'll often have to cast Show and Tell, the namesake card. And so if you have a way to just kind of cycle from your hand into Oracle as your 3rd card down at instant speed, then in response to their Show and Tell, you can just do that and then put your Oracle into play. If they have an Omniscience, they won't be able to cast any sorcery speed card until your Oracle trigger resolves. And if it's like an Emrakul or Griselbrand, with Griselbrand they can draw 7, respond to the trigger, and try to Pyroblast you. But for the most part, that trigger is going to be pretty safe and often worth going for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This type of Show and Tell deck isn't on the full Cunning Wish for Sublime Epiphany sort of line. They're going to have Emrakul, Griselbrand. And if they don't have any mana floating, they'd have to find Spirit Guide and Pyroblast off Griselbrand, which is pretty reasonable to do off draw 14, but you still make them have it. That's a really cool line. I love killing people with their own Show and Tell. That's one of my favorite things to do in Legacy.
Gives you a good option to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. For the absolute best Magic the Gathering apparel on the market, check out the link in the video description to coalesceapparel.shop, and be sure to use the code BoshNRoll for 10% off when you check out. Okay, let's move on from this pile. You all watched the video last week, and if you didn't, then spoiler, my opponent finds the monster on the 2nd turn, and I lose because I tried to make a 2-turn stack here. And
okay.
There I am trying to figure out what went wrong with the pile, just looking at it.
I think, as far as overall value goes, losing that match to allow us to really just dive into it for your viewers is probably worth it, like as a net gain.
Yeah, that was a really great conversation. That was worth more than winning a game in a Moto League. And we had a game 3 still coming. So don't even know if it would have won the match. This will be a quick one. Hey, Max, what do we do about turn 1 opposition agent on the play from the opponent and a handful of fetch lands?
Well, the handful of fetch lands really throws a wrench into it. Opposition agent in general is very close to lights out, but not quite. So opposition agent, what it does when you cast Doomsday is that they'll control your search. They'll search your library for 5 cards and exile them. You'll be left with a 0-card library. And so if you have somehow, through an opposition agent, Dark Ritual and Doomsday, and a Thassa's Oracle in your hand that you can cast, you can Dark Rit Doomsday, your opponent finds 5 cards, whatever, then you just play an Oracle from hand with nothing left in library.
Okay. Yeah, so
So not this game.
Sure. Yeah.
There's no way.
Yeah, there's literally no outs, no way to remove Oppo Agent from play. There's no sculpting to be done here. And I conceded in response to the Thoughtseize. They just saw Flooded Strand, which could be anything, especially from BoshNRoll. Flooded Strand, I hope it's a little loaded when I play Flooded Strand compared to other lands, but also people, if they follow me, they might just know that I'm on some bullshit.
Yep. Playing everything and anything is the best way to not be put too hard on a deck.
Right. And you beat some version of Mono Black in the Showcase Challenge, but it was not quite this one because my opponent has Merit Lage in game 2, which your opponent did not.
Right.
Were you like blessed with quick Doomsdays back by Force of Will? How did you navigate that matchup? Did they just not oppo you?
They oppoed me and I forced.
Okay.
And then I essentially went for a fast Doomsday. And they followed up with a Sheoldred. And I set things up so that I had Oracle as my third card down, and I won with 1 life.
That rules.
Because going deeper down, I knew I would die to Sheoldred, so I tried to play around that. I was fortunate to have someone who played against my opponent by the time I played them in top 4. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't taken completely aback by what they could present.
Okay. And I've pondered into a turn 2 Sheoldred here.
Yep, with a force backup.
With force backup. And we can fast forward this game. Here's my turn 2 Sheoldred, and it does some stuff. And here's their turn 3 Merit Lage.
Yeah, as soon as they play the Hexmage, I mean, I know that everyone who's watching this video knows this, but not every game is a winnable game. Right. And that's okay.
Yep. You can play perfectly and still lose.
Yeah. I often say for doing well in the tournament, playing well is necessary but not sufficient.
Yes, nobody's ever won a tournament just by playing perfectly. Everybody who's ever won any tournament in their life also got super lucky at some point.
Yep.
Okay.
If you look at any large tournament, like on Magic Online, you can see all these crushers who went 0-2 and dropped that day.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can look at a top 8 and be like, oh, this top 8's stacked. And then you look at all these people who went 0-2. You could probably make out 8 great players you could reasonably see in the top 8 who went 0-2 that day. So, yeah, just because you lost a game does not mean that you did something wrong. It means something went wrong. And that's just the nature of the beast, especially when you play a deck like Doomsday that you can't actually play around everything.
Right.
And with Doomsday, like sometimes you have to make percentage calls on like what's your opponent's more likely to have between a couple things. And say you end up on the wrong side of a weighted coin flip. That doesn't mean that you played it wrong, and it doesn't mean that you should have won. I also don't necessarily like that terminology. It just means that you were likely to win the game and ended up not doing it, which happens.
Right. I also don't like the term should. I had a therapist tell me that when you say should, you should all over yourself. And,
I like that.
Yeah, and that was great. She wanted like should, could eliminated from the vocabulary of everybody, and I'm in for that. And you also see to the point of everybody has good days, bad days. You can play perfectly, still lose. Pro Tours tend to float the strongest players to the top because you're eliminated at X5. You have so many losses to give. And team events reduce variance because you're playing best 2 out of 3, best 2 out of 3s. So like that's how like Huey Jensen and his team just top 8'd every team event for 4 years because they were the best 3 players and variance reduced. And still variance is involved. A lot of great teams don't make the top 4. A lot of great Pro Tour players don't make every top 8, but reducing variance over larger events or larger games helps with that. But in a normal straight Swiss tournament where X2 and you're out, forget about it. You need to be both playing extremely well and touched by the magic gods. We're in our last match here. I mulliganed to no lander, and
often correct.
I'm about to keep this hand with duress. So I sent the second Doomsday to the bottom because I figured with duress we can punch through the one I have.
Yep, and then against every non-blue deck, that backup Doomsday is like a dead card.
Right.
And against blue decks, you don't necessarily have enough mana right now to jam out 2 Doomsdays.
Yep.
This was a hard duress. I was not sure what I was going to take when I was looking at this.
Yeah, I think I remember being really proud of this one.
Yeah. It's not where I would have ended up, but I absolutely think you were right.
Right. So I end up taking Unmask because they don't have a clear way to get a monster into their graveyard, but if they draw a monster, they can unmask themselves. And
they have grief, right? That was the thing.
Right. They can't grief themselves. The grief has to target me.
Right. So grief is the monster in some ways.
Right. Yeah. They can put grief in the graveyard. Oh, I took reanimate. That is not what I remember taking. Okay.
So this turned out really well for you because grief and unmask are such redundant cards that you figured, okay, I'm going to put this away. And at this point, what you do is you hide Doomsday and Lotus Petal.
Right. Okay.
And so they just kind of rip your hand to shreds with this grief because they see Personal Tutor and fear Doomsday, not knowing that you already have it.
Yeah.
So that was a really good heads-up play. I liked taking the second reanimate because what you did there is you prevented them from having 2 reanimated griefs.
Right.
So I thought that was sweet.
Okay.
It was I was looking at that and be like, I have no idea what I would take here. Yeah, so this is a pretty straightforward air quotes pile where against Reanimator, they can't disrupt you. The thing that they can do sometimes is get in, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name, but it's the Thalia creature.
The emissary.
Force Spike.
Yeah, Force Spike creature. Whatever that idiot was called.
Spike. Yeah, so so Cavern of Souls and Thassa's Oracle kind of gets you there. Because you can, if they don't do that creature, you just cycle into Oracle. And if they do put that creature into play, you just wait one more turn and then cycle into Cavern and Oracle.
Right. Chancellor of the NX for the people yelling at us in the comments. I hope we got a few comments while we're thinking about it. Thanks for the engagement, folks. This was the first and only chance in the league I got to just really rip it with the Consider pile.
Yeah, I'm glad you demonstrated it. It was worth, just building the Consider pile here to demonstrate what can be done. Worth doing.
Yeah, being able to win on the spot from 0 cards is really powerful.
1 mana source in 0 cards. So say you're playing around Wasteland, like in a completely different world. That same pile just wins. So that's super powerful and awesome.
Yeah, hard on the life total. I'm at 2 here, but and that's why it's not everywhere. Not much of interest happens in the rest of this game. I bring in all my combo stuff plus my graveyard hate and then just get dumpstered anyway. The lack of leyline hurt me here. And you, on your Everyday Eternal podcast appearance, Kai Sawatari is one of their co-hosts and obviously another Doomsday expert. You guys got into Ideas Unbound a little bit, which is not appearing in this build of the deck at all, but it does enable a lot of pass the turn piles. Where are you with Ideas Unbound? And is there room for Ideas Unbound and Deep Analysis in the same list, or what? Just talk about that for me.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
While we watch me die to Reanimator.
Sounds good. It's more interesting than watching Grizzlebrand kill you. So Deep Analysis versus Ideas Unbound is a little bit of a false dichotomy. The reason why they're often compared is because it's hard to fit everything into a Doomsday list that you'd want to fit, and so you kind of have to make cuts of cards that you'd like access to in theory. And Ideas Unbound and Deep Analysis are cards that will often not make the cut because they enable particular kinds of piles. What deep analysis allows you to do is win games from on the same turn or even on past turns with very low resources that um, no other card can allow for you. And the reason that exists is consider. Because when you consider and bin a deep analysis and draw a Lion's Eye Diamond, that nets you 1 mana and you're up a card.
Right.
Because, you've used a consider and turned that into. Actually, you're up 2 cards. I misspoke because the deep analysis hit the graveyard. So +1 mana plus 2 cards is exactly enough to go mana, second mana source, and an oracle, and then throw some cyclers in there, and that's that. So I like that. Brainstorm and consider piles can do the same thing for you if you have an extra card in hand to give. Because after the brainstorm, you have to put down an extra card back to be able to keep 2 cards in hand to play Alliance of Diamond and cycle it. Now, Ideas Unbound exists on a completely different axis. On a macro scale, and any situation that you could cast Ideas Unbound, you could also cast Thassa's Oracle. They're both 2 blue, right? So if you have blue for Ideas Unbound, in theory, you have the blue to cycle into a Thassa's Oracle.
Right.
So at that point, why would you play Ideas Unbound? Well, a great answer would be against elves, where they're playing a ton of endurances and you're afraid of getting endurance. Say that you make your pile as follows. So you Ideas Unbound into a Lion's Eye Diamond, a Cycle Effect, a Tormod's Crypt, which is a card I was considering talking about, and have your last card be Thassa's Oracle. So you would Ideas Unbound, draw the Lion's Eye Diamond, the Cycler, and the Crypt. You play out the Crypt, at which point you could then cycle, hold priority, crack the Lion's Eye Diamond for triple blue, and draw and cast Thassa's Oracle. If your opponent endurances you, then you crypt yourself. And then another kind of pile that Ideas Unbound would enable is being able to draw. If you say have extra mana, you could have Ideas Unbound draw you into Oracle, 1 extra mana source, and Pact of Negation. So say you're afraid of Dress Down. The Pact would act as immediate backup in all these situations where you don't have 2 turns to try to win because your opponent might just beat you if you pass again. So having that kind of sudden burst of cards on a pass the turn pile gives you access to some things that you wouldn't normally have on a pass the turn pile. That windfall.
Right. And the deck building choice you've made over Pact of Negation and Ideas Unbound is the 4 Personal Tutor. Is that the thing you're doing uniquely?
They would still play 4 Personal Tutor. They would play only 1 Thassa's Oracle.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because if you're pacting, there's really no point to having a second one.
Right.
And then your deep analysis probably also wouldn't be in the deck because you can't fit everything.
Gotcha.
There's also arguments for that kind of deck not having a swamp and playing 1 fewer land.
Okay. And we've talked about Pyroblast a number of times where the piles where once Doomsday resolves, don't give them anything else to counter, and Ideas Unbound is aggressively counterable by Pyroblast, Flusterstorm, Spell Pierce, whatever you got, it's going to work on that card.
It sure is. And then also a lot of the ways that people fight against Doomsday are with, Narset, Hullbreacher, Spirited Labyrinth, cards that prevent you from drawing extra cards. And so Ideas Unbound also walks right into those cards.
It does do that. All right. Well, thank you for that final lesson. We're at the end of this league, and we're also at about 90 minutes, which was a pretty good estimate. That's about what we thought this was going to take. What do you have any closing thoughts for us about the deck or this league or just anything at all? Just let it rip. What's in your mind?
Yeah, Doomsday is a lot less scary than it used to be when it was like Doomsday Fetchland Tendrils. It's not nearly as hard of a deck as people say it is. I mean, and even if you mess up, don't worry about it. Play, try to win, lose, learn. As long as you're having fun and Magic is an outlet for you to express yourself and grow and learn new things, then I think that that's a win in and of itself. So if you want to try Doomsday, but you're like afraid of how hard it is, feel free to use my sideboard guide and pile guide as instructions to kind of get you started, and then just give it a shot. And if you lose games because of your inexperience, literally nobody is going to fault you. There's also a pretty awesome Doomsday Discord. Um, I think I'll send the link to Brian, and he'll put it in the show notes or the YouTube video notes description. But it's a great resource for getting you started and a great place to post screenshots of, hey, what would you have done here? I did this and it worked out in this way and I ended up losing. Was there a pile here that could have won? Kind of like what we did in this video, but for yourself on your own time. So it's a very nice community and people are extremely helpful. And I've used them as a resource a lot. And so I am happy to kind of just keep passing that along.
Yep, and we appreciate you for it. Max, like you said, I'm going to put all of your links and that Doomsday Discord link and everything in the video description. Where can we find you? Just plug yourself real quick and we will get out of here.
Sure. So me and my buddy Min write for minmaxblog.com. We write less regularly than we used to just due to life being very busy. But I often will post on Twitter at Maxtortion. I will, as far as Magic-related content goes, I'll post decks I'm playing, what's working, what isn't. I will also just kind of have fun with Twitter. I try to be entertaining, be amusing. Shoot me a follow there. You can obviously find the Cyber Guide and Pile Guide as my pinned tweet.
Yep, that's where I found it. And I appreciate that a lot. I'm going to get us out of here for the day. Viewers, thank you all for watching the same video again, hopefully with even more insight than the first time. If you didn't watch the first one, run it back as a double header. That would be cool to see what I was thinking in real time and then what Max talked me through later. And as always, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, check out the links, Max's links and mine, Patreon, and the other things that support the channel. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next time.